All right, everyone, welcome. My name is Christina Ingram. I'm the local interest librarian here at the New Hanover County Public Library. May is the start of Preservation Month, and tonight we have with us a wonderful group of people, and I will allow you all to introduce yourselves. Thank you so much for joining us, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis Gilbert.
Well, we want to thank the New Hanover County Public Library for hosting us this evening, and welcome those of you in the audience here today and the folks that are joining us in real time via Zoom and in the future. We're going to make sure this is up on our website so folks can be oriented to the 2022 Preservation Challenge as we move forward here during this National Preservation Month. My name is Travis Gilbert. I'm the Executive Director of the Historic Wilmington Foundation. And this evening, joining us is Jessica Baldwin. She is the Historic Preservation Planner for the City of Wilmington. Isabel Shepard is the Development and Outreach Coordinator for the Historic Wilmington Foundation. Don Helms is the Resource Coordinator for the Historic Wilmington Foundation. And Deb Helms is the Manager of Legacy Architectural Salvage. So tonight we are going to spend a few minutes describing 5 tangible ways that you can make a difference on behalf of historic preservation here in the Lower Cape Fear in honor of National Preservation Month. As background, we at HWF used to put together a list of most threatened places in the Lower Cape Fear region to celebrate National Preservation Month. But we felt that those most threatened places lists had a somewhat limited audience base. How many of us have the resources to acquire a historic property and then restore said historic property? Very, very few. We thought this was a much better way to engage our members and our volunteers and our supporters and future members during National Preservation Month. So this is the second year that staff has worked on developing 5 action items to inspire and encourage preservationists across the Lower Cape Fear to celebrate National Preservation Month. So just quickly as a review, tonight we're going to discuss Point Peter, local landmarks such as Greenfield Lake, African American burial grounds such as Maid Cemetery, preservation through salvage, many opportunities to participate in salvage in Wilmington, including our very own Legacy Architectural Salvage, and a list called Preservation Resources Network, which is a list of professionals and preservationists within our communities who are either currently or very recently have participated in preservation projects that have required either a certificate of appropriateness through the City of Wilmington through Jessica, or are preservation award winners during National Preservation Month through the Historic Wilmington Foundation. So I want to start with Point Peter. Point Peter, as we defined, it is a peninsula at the confluence of the Cape Fear and the northeast branches of the Cape Fear River. And the peninsula has had a variety of names. Historically, several names have alluded to the peninsula's use to intimidate enslaved people in the Lower Cape Fear region. It being the confluence of 2 major waterways that were used for transportation and for commerce to intimidate enslaved people. This was like a billboard. This would have been like an exit on Route 40 to intimidate any population here in the Lower Cape Fear. This Point Peter or peninsula provides a stage in order to do so. The Point Peter, the name that we use for our advocacy, relates to a historic antebellum plantation, a rice plantation that existed at the peninsula or just north of the peninsula, owned by the Peter family. And it was a rice plantation, the forced slaver of Gullah Geechee peoples that were forcibly removed from their homes in West Africa, and the generations that were raised in the Gullah Geechee culture here in America labor to produce rice, one of the first cash crops to accumulate the wealth that made Wilmington possible, the grand residences and commercial buildings that are on this side of the river. So not only are there cultural resources related to the Gullah Geechee peoples and interpretive opportunities for the Gullah Geechee Heritage Corridor on Point Peter, it is adjacent to the USS North Carolina. It's one of two National Historic Landmarks here in New Hanover County. And Historic Wilmington Foundation is concerned that any high density development or introduction of impervious surfaces on Point Peter may adversely affect flooding events at the USS North Carolina and adversely affect view sheds at the USS North Carolina. Many other municipalities, counties, cities across the nation do use prescriptive zoning measures such as height restrictions and setback requirements to protect cultural view sheds. Annapolis, Maryland is one community, Fairfax County, Virginia, and many state capitals such as Austin or Sacramento. So we are challenging our preservation community to write the New Hanover County Commissioners and encourage the commissioners to protect natural and cultural resources when considering rezoning Point Peter from its industrial zoning today into any future zoning for Point Peter, whether that exists as a conservation zoning or a high density development conservation or high density development zoning. There's a pre-written email draft accessible for your use and adaptation at historicwilmington.org/preservation-challenge. We encourage you to go to that website to adapt that template for your own use and communicate to your elected officials in New Hanover County how you envision the protection of natural and cultural resources moving forward on Point Peter. So number 2 is Greenfield Lake, which is one of 7 designated local landmarks here in the city of Wilmington. This designation means that the community recognizes this property as an important historic resource worthy of preservation. We are currently advocating at HWF for several architectural historians to reconsider Greenfield Lake's eligibility for the National Register of Historic Places, an individual listing under criteria A and C. So today, to talk a little bit about the local landmark program here in Wilmington is Jessica Baldwin, the Historic Preservation Planner for the City of Wilmington, and interestingly enough, worked for the Landmark Commission at New York City. So very versed on the local landmark programs. So Jessica, tell us a little bit about local landmarks and what makes them unique and how you envision local landmarks here in the city of Wilmington, how this program can grow in the future.
Well, local landmarks have individual significance. They're not, historic districts have a mass significance in that all of them combined together work to tell a larger story. Individual landmarks are ones that have their own unique story or significant to either someone lived there, someone built the building, that are significant to the history of the city as a whole. So they tend to be, or they have a very strong, high architectural value, or a little bit of both kind of thing, which usually tends to be the case, right? Like people that were prominent within time frames of history tended to have the most money, which in turns tended to build the nicest buildings, as the story goes. So it's that, there are, with Greenfield, that's a large local landmark that's exciting, with lots of pieces involved. We just I actually today just reached out with them in regards to kind of being a part of that plan. I just started about a month ago, so I'm just like learning all these things that have been happening before I came along. So I'm looking forward to working with them. But I think that Local landmarks tell a greater story, and can really act as points of interest for people that live within the community, people that don't live within the community. You can say, oh, well, you can find me beside the blue building, whatever color that building is, or whatever it has, that building has, like, that signifies it. Usually people are able to recognize it, and that provides a sense of destination to people, which is a large part of what a landmark really is. I think with individual landmarks, there's opportunities there. There's tax credits, both state and national, and I believe local. And so, I think as we understand the larger cultural story and history of Wilmington, there's an opportunity for even more to come about that could be really valuable in completing and telling that more inclusive story.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. So next we have African American. Well, I must state, so the challenge for Greenfield Lake is to participate in a cleanup of this designated local landmark in partnership with the Cape Fear River Watch, which takes wonderful care of this local landmark, including offering boats for rent at a very affordable rate to enjoy this local landmark from a unique perspective on the water. So we're partnering with Cape Fear River Watch on Saturday, May 21st from 9 to 11 to clean up this local landmark. We'll gather at the Greenfield Lake Boathouse, located at 1739 Burnett Boulevard, again at 9 a.m. We'll have plenty of supplies, from trash bags to safety vests to these little kind of rods that help you not interact too intimately with whatever we might find out there. So feel free to come yourselves. We'll have plenty of supplies, or bring supplies if you'd like. Again, Saturday, May 21st from 9 to 11. And you can find out more information about this cleanup at our website, historicwilmington.org. And our website also links to Jessica and the City of Wilmington's page on their website, so you can learn more about the 6 other designated local landmarks here in the City of Wilmington. So thirdly, tonight we want to discuss briefly the African American burial grounds that are located within our region. Our region's historic African American burial grounds are endangered by development and neglect. Hopefully we will not relive the events of last March, when in Edens Lane and Pender County, development unfortunately disturbed a historic African American burial ground and damaged several headstones and grave sites until officials could locals could notify officials on the destruction of this valuable resource. Thankfully, here in New Hanover County, we have the wonderful work of Bambi Caravan, who's a county CAD engineering specialist who works diligently to map African American burial grounds into the county's GIS system. So when developers are receiving permits, if that development is too close to a protected burial site, her office is triggered and can take the necessary precautions. But tonight, to speak about African American burial grounds, we have Isabel Shepard, who has spent a significant amount of time organizing and marketing and volunteering herself at Maid Cemetery. So Isabel, tell us a little bit about how HWF got involved in Maid Cemetery, what you've learned about the cemetery, and how this legislation might be helpful in our efforts.
Right. So just to give you all some perspective, Maid Cemetery is located in Wilmington's East Side neighborhood and adjoining Maid's Park, formerly abandoned for cemeteries. It's a historic African-American cemetery established in the late 19th century. And while it was initially started as a family cemetery, it quickly evolved into a community burial ground. And in May of 2021, HWF made a commitment to community advocate Kathy King to help provide volunteer manpower to clean the overgrown and neglected cemetery. We have cleared the ground around graves, both marked and unmarked, as well as clearing down trees that had fallen during Hurricane Florence. Thanks to the tireless work of volunteers, Maid Cemetery is now cleared of overgrown vegetation. When families did not have the financial means, I suppose I should back up. We have tried to clear away the overgrown vegetation that is unintended, but there has been a tradition of marking the graves instead of with a tombstone, which might have been financially unfeasible. Individuals would mark graves of their family members with certain plants like azaleas, gardenias, magnolias. Unique bamboo and palm-like plants have adorned burial sites, and there is a tradition that those are actually the spirits of the dead. So our volunteers have not only cleared the overgrown brush, but they have been careful to preserve these more natural markers. So our caring volunteers have gone out of their way. Now the plants and bamboo palms are growing tall and strong, a symbol of the increasing strength of preserving Maid Cemetery. So again, as I said, volunteers have gathered routinely over the last few months at Maids. One of the things that I find most heartening is that folks will gravitate towards certain parts of the cemetery. They might want to do the far reach, right? And they almost get to know the individuals that are buried there. They think of their names when they go back. They almost say like, I'm gonna go visit Freeman, you know? And there's a tenderness there. We've all sort of developed a relationship with those interred. One day stands out in particular, Juneteenth. It was heartening to meet the descendants on that day of Freeman Hall, 3 generations, daughter, granddaughter, and great-grandson, who came to honor his memory by tending to his grave. Another notable day was the addition of 2 grave markers. This happened in early April. A family member was able to recognize his grandfather, Pink Hines, and a more distant relative, Lettice Spain, by laying new burial markers on their graves. Maurice Hines, the grandson of Pink, led the effort, and we were moved by the words of Frank Hines, Pink's great-grandson, who said, "We show up here today as 3 generations to see where we come from so that we'll never be lost in the future." Work is underway to clean and repair the cemetery's headstones, which represent a diversity of styles and mediums. There are beautiful examples of vernacular concrete headstones, grave goods, and inlaid glass. My favorite are the glass inlays, which symbolize the mirror image between life and death. I find that to be beautifully poetic. These mourning traditions represent the cultural influence of West African burial customs in Wilmington's history. For example, grave goods are everyday items left behind at burial sites. We have found seashells on a child's grave, a mason jar, various bottles. And so every time we go, we uncover something new, and sometimes we uncover actual grave markers. And then other times we uncover something as small as a seashell. During October's Preservation Weekend, we did a panel and cleanup at Maid Cemetery where we taught appropriate techniques for cleaning graves. A lot of folks might think, oh, in order to clean a grave, I'll go out there with some bleach. Turns out that is not what you should do. Please don't do that. There are appropriate chemical solutions. And one of the things that I think was most beneficial about that day was teaching those who care about these cemeteries how to appropriately care for them. You know, you might think, oh, it's good to take a weed whacker out and clear away the brush, but that might brush up against a headstone, you know. It might remove some of these untraditional markers, such as the natural plants. So I think that I was really proud to see an organization step up and not just do the work, but teach others how to as well. So, and often cemetery preservation is volunteer by volunteer, headstone by headstone. So it's even more important in that realm. So to get into a bit of the actual challenge, as Travis has alluded to, our region's rural cemeteries and burial grounds for traditionally marginalized people are in danger from development and neglect. Just in this county alone, there are dozens of abandoned historic cemeteries. And just over a year ago, Maids was one such site. More support is needed, both for Maids and for these other cemeteries. Fortunately, the African American Burial Grounds Preservation Act was recently introduced into Congress. The legislation would establish a program at the National Park Service to provide grant opportunities and technical assistance to local partners to research, identify, survey, and preserve these historic sites. As the grant writer for the Historic Wilmington Foundation, I see numerous possibilities within this legislation. There are various materials, costs that add up. You wouldn't think about it, but yard debris bags become expensive when you need that many of them. Weed whackers, leaf blowers, appropriate cleaning solutions. And beyond that, such funds could support technical assistance, such as a survey to ascertain the boundaries of the cemetery or to better identify unmarked graves. We could use a fence and a sign to better delineate and recognize the historic sacred sites. And I think it is also important to note that other cemeteries are not as lucky as Maids. They have even fewer resources. I think of the individuals who have taken on the monumental task of perpetual care, all on their own. Chris Eaton and his family have, single-handedly taken on Freeman Cemetery, and I know they could use this support as well from this grant funding. I find the phrase perpetual care to be deeply inspiring. That this is not just care in the present, but that we are intending it to continue on indefinitely. And that is what historic cemeteries need and require. And yet often there's, after a while, there's no one there to take on this task. So as the challenge for this, I urge you to go to historicwilmington.org/preservation-challenge. There is an email already drafted for your use. You can adapt it as you please. And there are links to the 3 representatives that represent this region and that who you can petition to make sure this legislation passes. It takes just a moment of your time, certainly far less than the hours that volunteers have put in at Maids. So if you can just take 5 minutes, support that legislation, it would make a huge difference in our community and nationwide. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yes, the bags and bags of debris that we have picked up. Didn't realize all those bags that cost could really rack up. And what Isabel won't tell you is how many supplies that she has donated out of the kindness of her heart. I think there's a few whackers out there that have her name on it. So next, we are gonna hop down to Deb Helms, who's the manager of Legacy Architectural Salvage, and discuss how so many of our irreplaceable historic resources end up in the landfill. And how at HWF, we firmly believe that preservation is an act of sustaining the Earth's resources, and how Legacy Architectural Salvage enacts that important value and vision at HWF through the good work of so many staff members and countless volunteer hours.
We are so excited to be a part of the preservation challenges this year. Legacy Architectural Salvage and our wonderful volunteers take very seriously preserving and protecting the irreplaceable and saving history one piece at a time. Of course, we always want to save a building, but if a building is not able to be saved, we go in and we salvage the parts and pieces, the doors, the windows, the flooring, the mantles. And the great thing about that is that instead of going into landfill, it's going to go into a home that someone's going to use to repair their floors, replace their windows. And the other thing that we get to do at Legacy as staff and also as volunteers is tell the story of these resources that are donated to us. So just one such story, I had a lady come in the other day and she had an old urn that she wanted to donate. And you could tell it was really hard for her to part with it. She said it had been her great-great-grandmother's. And when she came in, she gave it to me and she said, it's really, really old, it's cracked. And I said, well, that doesn't matter. Somebody's gonna love it. And she kind of stood there a minute and she said, are you sure somebody's gonna love it? Because it was my great-great-grandmother's. And I said, absolutely. So that's one of the best things that we are able to do with the donations that we receive. We accept donations. Some people just drive up and they've got a truck full of doors or wood or mantles. That happens to us quite often. And then we have people who call us that unfortunately the property is going to be demolished. It can't be saved. So we go out with the deconstruction team and we carefully deconstruct the old growth, our pine flooring, the windows, the mantles. We bring it into Legacy. We tell the story of the house. We tell the stories of the people who lived in the homes, because a lot of times that's the most important thing we do, is to be able to not only put that into someone's hands for repairs or to add historic context to a new build, but to be able to tell the story of the historic resources. And as Travis said, too much of our irreplaceable historic resources end up in the landfill. Over 600 million tons of demolition and commercial waste go into the landfill every year. That's more than twice what the garbage is that we create every year, just as people throwing away our own garbage. So what we do at Legacy is we take very seriously saving everything that we can save. And we are happy to be able to support historic preservation through that effort. The challenge is we're sending out the challenge for people to donate pre-1960s architectural salvage, furniture, mantles, and those types of things. We are very lucky that we have a wide network of customers who regularly donate to us. One of our longtime volunteers in the past just sent me an email. She had her parents pass away. They have probably 150 years of history in the Wilmington area. And she said, Deb, we've got furniture. I've got a baby carriage that was my grandmother's. And she talked to me about taking the grandbabies and pushing them through the downtown Wilmington area. So we will come out and pick it up. If somebody has a donation, that's a large donation, they're not able to get it to us, we will come out, we will pick that up. If it's something that we need to do a deconstruction on, we will schedule that. And we have amazing volunteers that do all of this with us. We could not do it without our volunteers, and they are as passionate as the staff when it comes to preservation, and they all lend their time, their talents. We have people that are only deconstruction. We have wonderful people that know about antiques that come in, and volunteers teach me about antiques. And they welcome people in, and they make people feel that the things that they are donating are meaningful, not only to them, but will be meaningful in the future to someone else. So we encourage you to donate and let your friends and family know that we take donations Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday from 9 to 2, and Thursday 9 to 5. And the address is 1831 Dawson Street. We are in the same building as Stevens Ace Hardware. We're in the back warehouse portion. So, and if it's a situation where any of those dates don't work out for you, give us a call at 910-338-6443 and I will make it happen.
Keep that down. I'll put my walking tour voice on. Thank you, Deb. I really appreciate that. Legacy Architectural Salvage represents our last best hope for preservation. So when all else fails, the allure of historic preservation tax credits at a federal state level, local landmark 50% tax deferment, the importance of maintaining the integrity of a historic district. When all those carrots fail, when trying to preserve a building intact, we always know we can count on Deb and Don and Kelly and all the volunteers to ensure that if we cannot preserve the building intact, we can at least preserve the parts. And as Deb said, let its legacy live on. So finally tonight, we want to introduce Don Helms, who's our resource coordinator, and he's going to be speaking about the Preservation Resources Network. This is a list of preservation professionals within our community who have recently completed preservation projects or have done so in the recent past or are currently working on preservation projects, sometimes with Don himself, who acts as the liaison to the contractors for our current preservation projects, like the one on South 7th Street we are rehabilitating through our preservation equity fund. So Don, tell us a little bit about the PRN and how folks can get involved with this National Preservation Month.
Well, actually, Travis, just to let you know, as if you didn't already, we have 135 names and addresses, contact information from anywhere from architects, carpenters, electricians, floor specialists, general contractors, handyman, HVAC people, landscapers, masons, painters, plasterers, plumbers, roofers, window specialists, and 18 miscellaneous.
Those are the ones you need to call.
Exactly. Exactly. But these people, as Travis said, have done work for HWF in the past and have done some amazing work in preservation and restoration. And they come highly regarded. This was put together by our volunteers and with a great bit of there was a lot of dancing around trying to say, okay, this guy was doing this, and he also, hey, he didn't own this house too. Okay, so anyway, so these are the people that if you need a resource for whatever, please come to the historic website. It's on there. You can download it, print it off, and like I said, as of first of this month, we have 135, and I actually added a couple for myself. So I mean, there's a couple more that people that I know that I would like to see on there. So
Exactly the challenge.
yeah, we want you.
Don's participating.
Yeah. What we would like to do, challenge is to add to this list. We want to see this list grow because as it grows, the knowledge of the community, and we feel like that this is a lot of time that's put together, putting us together, and we want to see people out there using it. So please look it up and use it.
So I'm going to spend a few minutes asking some questions I have, and then we'll open it up to the audience and any folks online. I think that Christine would be able to use the chat feature and make sure we address any questions out there. So my first question is for Jessica. So this list, our volunteers went through 3 to 4 years of COA applications and pulled out the contractors that received a certificate of appropriateness. For your role and for historic preservation in our community, why is it important to go to a contractor who's familiar with the COA and with your office?
Well, it makes my job easier, which is, maybe neither here nor there for some people, but by at least understanding that process and knowing that that's a process that you have to go through, it makes it easier for them have hired this person. It also means that one of the major goals of asking for issuing COAs and asking for this additional kind of layer is that we have documentation of the building and the changes that occur to it. And so that 100 years from now, when someone's trying to buy a 200-year-old building at this point or 300-year-old building at this point, and they know things have changed through the years, they can come to us and we can provide them with complete documentation that says, well, this part was added in 1970 or this part was enclosed in 2005. Just that information becomes invaluable to the story of the building, which for future generations provides a story of the city and its changing development.
My next question is for Isabel. So Isabel is not only volunteering at Maid Cemetery, a little birdie told me, or a picture, that you also volunteered a day doing decons at Shandy Hall. Tell us about your experience deconstructing that mid-19th and why preservation through salvage is so important to you.
Absolutely. It was one of my favorite days with the Historic Wilmington Foundation, and it was a day that I served as a volunteer. So I really enjoyed going. I learned so much from Dawn, who led that deconstruction effort, who taught me how to pry off siding. So as a homeowner, that was a valuable little skill that I now have up my sleeves. I will say that it honestly is helpful for anyone who wants to better understand buildings. Doing that kind of work helps show you how a building stands, how a building is put together. As you deconstruct it, you see how it was constructed to begin with. And I think that was in many ways the most enlightening and inspiring aspects of that work. One of the things that we found is a mortise and lock.
It was mortise and tenon.
Mortise and tenon.
With a
Tell us more about that, Mortis. I'm just going to hand that over to you for a concept.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, so we were doing some deconstruction and peeling back the layers. That's the way that we have found that you get to the real story. And we were taking off some, Isabel was taking off some outside.
Doing my best.
She was doing her best to take some outside siding off, and we still had the lath and plaster on the inside. And when she took it off, it revealed that there was a pillar post there, which we knew was there, but we knew it was there. But then once we got down lower, we found out that there was a corner brace that was mortise and tenon in there. And then, and for anybody that might not know, that's when they actually would, they cut a pocket into the wood, and then they would have a tenon that fit into it, and then they would drill a hole in it, and then they would put a peg through it. So this guy in 1850 something, that day his job was to drill that hole, whittle that peg, and then pound it in that hole. And before we took that out, you have to take a moment and think about, okay, this has not been moved since 1853. And literally, as I'm telling you this, the chills kind of go up my back because, there is nothing like that in the world. You can't pay for it, but I will tell you, you can come to Legacy and see it. You can come to Legacy, you can buy it. But the thing about it is that it is not ending up in a landfill, because when this old growth pine is gone, and I hate to get off on a tangent here, but I will. When this stuff is gone, it's gone, it's gone forever. It's not coming back. I don't care what you do, it's not coming back. And when you can take and touch a piece of wood that's anywhere from, oh, I don't know, maybe 400 years old, and in the course of a day, when we'll take and we'll cut a piece of wood for a customer, and it's just something that I do. Smell it. I'll take and smell it. Cut it. I'll smell the end of it. The stuff is amazing.
So I'm going to veer Dawn to something else he's passionate about.
Yeah.
So Dawn works as our liaison with contractors with Gilbert Lodge, the second oldest Black Masonic temple in the state of North Carolina. The oldest Black Masonic temple, King Solomon Lodge, is currently being preserved through a partnership between that lodge and the New Bern Preservation Foundation. We have a very similar partnership here in Wilmington, where we are assisting by providing grant writing support, i.e. Isabel's days, writing grant applications, and also technical assistance through Dawn and working with several contractors like E.V. Pancook, a structural engineer with great experience working in historic preservation projects, and Jeff Adolfson, the senior restoration specialist at the State Historic Preservation Office. But additionally, behind the scenes, we have prepared a local landmark application that is currently under review by SHPO, thanks to the great work of public historian Macallie Gibbons and Dr. William Moore, the nation's leading expert on Masonic lodges and a faculty member at Boston University. So, Dawn, if that local landmark application is successful, Gilbert Lodge will have a series of protections against demolition. What does that mean to you, being in that lodge, talking with Raymond Mott and Gregory White, a former and current most worshipful master?
Well, the time that I spent with them and the times that I've spent with them has been remarkable, and to see their passion in trying to save this very amazing place. But I think that, not to get too far off, but, to get this to where it is a establishment of a building that is taken back to something that is purely correct and generating revenue for them, and them having a place to worship, without getting rained on, and what we saw up there, we went up to the third floor and looking in just the floors and the ceiling, the rafters, is just, they need a lot of help, and we're going to see what we can do to help them.
Did you smell the wood?
I did.
So my last question is for Deb. So Deb, you were out there the first day at Maid Cemetery when we were tramping over logs and wood, and you could barely see any headstones out there. Tell us about HWF's new vision statement and how you see our increased focus on diversifying our energies and our resources to telling a broader story, such as Maid Cemetery.
I was out on the first day, and it was just a wonderful experience to be there with volunteers from all over the Wilmington area. Kathy was there. She was the person who came to us initially about Maid Cemetery and cleaning it up. She had a history of family members who were buried there and did not know where they were buried, and so that was part of it. She had researched the genealogy. We are committed as an organization to inclusivity, as well as going out into the community and making a difference to everyone in the Wilmington community. And Maid Cemetery is one of those things that we've been able to do. And now Maid Cemetery, we just recently had a community led by Kathy, was a community engagement event out in that area at the building. And we had a lot of members from the general area come in, learn about legacy, learn about what she does and some other things in the community. So we're really excited to be able to really go into the community and make a difference.
Well, thank you all. I'm hoping we can entice a few questions out of our audience members. And folks joining us online, if you have any questions, you can throw those in the chat box. And anybody listening into the future, please know that if you have any questions about the Preservation Challenge this year, or you'd like to learn more about any of our panelists or the great work of HWF, you can email hwf@historicwilmington.org, and our team will get back to you very quickly. Or you can visit our Facebook pages, Historic Wilmington Foundation or Legacy Architectural Salvage. So that was year round, yeah.
Do you want to talk about the other events you have coming up for the month of May for Preservation Month?
That sounds great. Thank you for the little nudge, Christine. So this weekend, we have one of our workshops at Legacy Architectural Salvage. We host a workshop each month in the spring and fall seasons. Typically, they're on a Saturday morning from around 10 to 11:30 or noon. This season, we featured Deb focusing on how to salvage ephemera into Valentine's for February. In March, we had Quinn Cherry, who focused on wood floor repair, how to fix up old floors. In April, we had Cardinal Joinery talk about maintenance and the repair of historic windows. And this Saturday from 10 to 11:30, we have Bill Petrie, who's in the audience, who's going to be discussing antiques and describing some identifying features of antiques to perhaps close in on a date, and this definition of value. How do you value an antique? So there are still spots. We'd love to have you. Go to historicwilmington.org, and on our menu, you can find the Legacy Workshop tab where you can register for this free workshop. And then next Saturday, May 14th, we have our annual spring market at Legacy Architectural Salvage, featuring on upcycling and other vendors that focus on the great work of sustainability and upcycling. That is from 9 to 2 at Legacy Architectural Salvage, located at 1831 B Dawson Street behind Stevens Hardware. The next day, that's Sunday, May 15th, we have a walking tour focusing on the historic preservation movement in downtown Wilmington. The 2 o'clock walking tour is filled up, but we still have spaces for the 3:30 walking tour. You can visit, again, historicwilmington.org and sign up for that walking tour. And we will conclude the month on May 21st with an antiques appraisal fair, our first ever. That is going to be from 9 to 2 at Legacy Architectural Salvage. You can find details about bringing in items for an informal appraisal by several great business owners and antique aficionados that are volunteering their time to make that possible. So all at historicwilmington.org or our Facebook pages.
you. And then I do have a question online. Are you planning on conducting any additional cemetery cleanups events at other forgotten local cemeteries, or are there other Maid's cemetery cleanup?
Isabel, why don't you take that question?
Yes, let me pull up. Okay. Yes, I'm pulling up the dates now for Maid Cemetery. We do not have any coming up for other cemeteries. Again, there's such a need in this community, but for Maids in particular, we have Saturday, May 14th. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Saturday, May 14th, June 11th, July 9th. This is all on Saturdays. August 13th, September 10th, and October 8th. And that is always from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We provide everything that you could possibly need. Although if you have your, favorite gardening shears or gloves, feel free to bring those. But yes, again, that's May 14th, June 11th, July 9th, August 13th, September 10th, and October 8th. All of this can be found as well on our website. If you go to our menu and look under service, there's all information pertaining to Maid Cemetery there.
Describe how you find Maid Cemetery.
Oh, yes, that's important. So Maid Cemetery is on, if you follow Manley Avenue down, you're going to park by the baseball field and then follow a little path, and that will lead to what now actually looks like a cemetery, as opposed to just overgrown brush. But you'll see volunteers gathering and forming there, but it is right across from the baseball field. Off of Princess and then Manley, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know you must have a question. There we go.
Yes, thank you. I had a question about the designated local landmark. How inclusive is it? Is it just the lake and its banks? Is it structures? Is it like Greenfield?
Greenfield includes,
Houses?
my understanding, I just started, so this is a new process for me too. My understanding is that Greenfield includes all the buildings and structures within the park itself, and landscape, and that all of that is incorporated within what is considered the local landmark, yes, and what is regulated by the city.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And a second question about, I noticed that the legacy, you collect anything pre-1960, which sounds very recent. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought of
Right.
that.
We do. We take donations pre-1960s. So at this point, that helps us to determine if somebody's asking, would you accept this? If it's pre-1960s, because you do have to think we're in 2022. So that's actually going to be 62 years old or older. And mid-century modern is really popular right now. So anytime somebody wants to bring something in from the 50s, the majority of what we receive, to be honest with you, for whether it's wood, doors, mantles, is probably mostly between 1900s and 1940s. And then several of our deconstructions have been on properties that were originally built in the mid 1800s to late 1800s. So we try to take in anything that we think that someone would enjoy and want to purchase. Yeah, but we try to limit it mostly to pre-1960s.
I have a question about the Preservation Resources Network. If somebody makes a submission online, do they get automatically added to the list, or is there like a vetting verification process before they get on?
Great question. I can answer that question. Yeah, we have two really great volunteers at the office, and they will give those folks a call and ask several questions. Have you completed a certificate of appropriateness? And it's a really great indicator if they have no idea what a COA is or what we're talking about. So we use that as an opportunity to educate the contractor or professional about the certificate of appropriateness. And now that Jessica is firmly in place at the City of Wilmington, we might just pass along Jessica's information. to use this as a learning opportunity for that professional. So there is a vetting process. It's important to know that the PRN is not a recommendation on behalf of Historic Wilmington Foundation. It purely is a list of professionals that have experience working in our local historic districts. But Don, what kind of indicators do you know when you walk into a work site with a contractor? What kind of thing do you know? Like, what makes you go, okay, these folks know what they're doing?
Well, one thing I have to typically when I get there, I look to see how far they brought the building in. In other words, what wall, I'm sorry. I'll answer your question, Travis. So anyway, I look and see, to what extent they're taking the remodel, which is what we're talking about, or the restoration. And we'll take a look at the walls. We'll see, I usually look for, again, the beams, stuff like this. And we look at the floors. We're always looking at floors. We're looking at the architectural detail. Sometimes, depending on to what extent, looking at picture molding, looking at the moldings, ceiling, the codes. Does it have pressed tin ceilings? What kind of ceilings does it have? Is it beadboard? Is there beadboard on the walls? Looking at, typically there's always been a place where the floor has gotten compromised, so we always look to see what kind of beams that are down there, as how big they are and what they did with what they had to work with back then.
And most importantly, are they a bull in a china shop, or are they taking a precise approach?
Yes, and exactly, and a lot of them, they will. A lot of these step lightly, from what I have seen, and do take it a peel at a time, as it were an onion, and taking it, and they're only taking off what they need to get to where they need to go for that particular part of the restoration. And the nice thing about it is that with what we do in the other aspect, is that they're looking for dimensional 2x4, what that is, and they need to replace one, they can come get one. So that if the home is looked at a later date, they can say, well, I don't know, gee, that's original to the home. So,
Don and I are like the odd couple. I walk through these work sites in a suit and tie, and he's in his car parts, and makes a good team.
well, I enjoy what we're doing.
Any other questions before we wrap up here? Any other questions online?
We could give the gentleman an opportunity to tell us about his prompts.
Yes, please.
Have 45 minutes. I was like, I think we just gotta sit alone
Wow.
We're
I
just
thought
teasing.
you would never ask. Get this stuff out of my way. So anyway, all right. So what I have in front of me here are a couple of different samples of wood, and all of this, and it's kind of hilarious because we have customers that come into the store from time to time, bless their hearts, and they, for whatever reason, we have a lot of fun with it because we have a lot of fun with our customers. But anyway, they'll ask them, what kind of wood is this? And I'm like, okay, all right, you're in the South. It's back in the 1800s. There's a bunch of pine trees around. What do you think you're going to use for building a house? Oh, well, there's a tree. Let's go get that one and we'll cut that one out. Gee, that's like 100 and some feet tall. Okay, and they're really straight too. But anyway, so the standard, if you're ever asked what kind of wood is it, it's always pine. That is your go-to answer. It's pine. All right, so this piece of wood right here, this came from down on Greenfield Sound Road. And it came out of a hunting shack that was built on the premises. 1857, I believe. The reason I know that was that they took the beam out, and when they were redoing the hunting shack, they pulled off the inside wall coverings. And somebody had signed their name on the board mat outside timber, or not timber, but siding in a beautiful scrolly name and the date, and it was 1857. So we knew that this came from 1857. This came from a house that was built in the 1853s, or right around 1853. That came from a house that Travis mentioned a little while ago. That was Shandy Hall. And all of these you'll find have an amazing tight growth ring, and that's because they're old growth pine. Old growth pine was extinct after the 1920s. It was all clear cut, sent up north for the Industrial Revolution. So we don't have but very few stands of old growth pine, and it's not commercially harvested at this moment that I know of, at least in North Carolina. So this came out of a house, and this has got what we call knob and tubes. These are the tubes, and they're porcelain, and they ran wires through those. There was a positive and a negative, and these were the insulators. So they went through, and the wires did not have a whole lot of insulation on them either. And so that's what the ceramics were for. And then they went to what they call knobs, and they were designed for right angles. So they would go and hit the right angle and go down.
And I'll just pause. Many electricians will run away from knob and tube. Our PRN has electricians that won't say love, but tolerate knob and tube.
Yeah.
So it's a great resource.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it is. This piece of wood came from up in Whiteville, North Carolina, and is that where you're from?
That is where I'm from.
Well, all right, well, Jessica, okay, what this piece of wood is right here. You have my attention.
Yelling.
Okay. My lovely spokesman here. Anyway, you can see right here, these are one half of a chevron, and a chevron was basically these, or what they call cat face wood. What they would do is they cut these chevrons in the tree. It ran down to what they call a box cut. It had a box in it, and the staff would run down, and then they would distill it. Now, in the 1700s, North Carolina, the port of North Carolina, shipped 70% of all the naval stores or turpentine products for the East Coast. I'm talking New York, Florida. 70% of that came out of North Carolina, or Wilmington, North Carolina. So really, you can kind of think that maybe Wilmington is all about pine. So anyway, so if it's out, it's fine. Anyway, these pieces typically are a lot heavier because they are so pitch rich. This was basically a sister piece, and one thing about this that's kind of interesting is you can see where the chevrons were cut into the tree, and then over time the tree was trying to heal itself, and it burrowed back into the chevrons down here on the bottom. And then the tree was cut down, and the pieces were milled, and then they sat up on a roof in Whiteville for, I don't know, probably 150 years together until the house was taken down. You just can't pay for stuff like that. I mean, two pieces of wood came out of the same tree and they're still together 150 years later. Okay, now, a lot of people down here talk about heart pine. Huh? You go right ahead. Okay, a lot of people down here talk about heart pine, heart pine, heart pine, heart pine. Well, this is about one of the best examples of heart pine that I could ever come across. And basically, this was a part of a floor joist that came out of a store down on Front Street. During a complete remodel, and it split out. But when it split, it was cut so that this was a hard cut, and when it split out, it left the heart of the tree right here, and then on the back side, you've got the really extremely tight growth rings from where it grew so slow. And then it picked up once it got later on in its years. But that's a very good example of what heart pine and what the heart of the tree looks like. Any questions? Yes?
Thank you.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked it. Yes,
How are these chevrons set?
chevrons.
How are they cut into that? What's the tool or how?
It was a round chisel-like fluted, kind of like you would see on a lathe, like a wood lathe.
See, there's a great example on at the Cape Fear Museum.
Oh, okay. So you couldn't take this into the forest, you had to take.
No, this was done in the tree.
In the tree, that's what I thought.
Yeah. The tree, they would do the tree probably, well, one
It's
guy
to
would.
collect turpentine from the.
Exactly,
from the
yeah,
tree, right?
yeah.
Okay.
But it was like, they went up as high as, okay, there was a base guy. And then there was a guy that stood on his shoulders.
Uh-huh.
And then there was a guy that stood on his shoulders. And I'm not really telling the truth right now, but it was something like that. I think they had a ladder. Yeah, they had a ladder. There was a rose clutcher ladder.
I had a few footnotes. Well, we appreciate you all that joined us here in person. We appreciated those of you who joined us online, either in real time or are perhaps watching this program in the future. We encourage you to celebrate National Preservation Month by taking action, by completing one or all 5 of these preservation challenges. Because remember, historic preservation is not a passive practice. Real change takes real action, and we want to ask, are you up to the challenge? So thank you to our panelists, thank you to our participants, and thank you to Christine and the Maid County Public Library for hosting us this evening.